Welcome to the latest, the most explosive, the most cutting-edge episode of Disclosure. In the history of the program, this may be our finest hour yet. My name is Shawn Boonstra, and for better or for worse, I will be the voice you will be listening to for the next hour or so. Unless, of course, you decide to reach up, grab the dial, and change the station. And if that's what you decide to do, well, I might just be speaking into empty space for the next 58 minutes or so. Because, what if you were my one and only listener today? I want you to think about that as you reach for the dial and consider another station. What if you were the only person who actually tuned in today? Imagine how sad it would be if you decided at this moment to listen to something else. Not only would it hurt my easily wounded feelings, but imagine all the wasted effort my crew would have expended because you quit listening today. Imagine the devastation you might wreak on the whole universe if you decided to listen to something. Oh, the humanity of it all. And I can tell the guys in the control booth can tell my wife is not in studio today because there is nobody sitting here to rein me in. I can just talk about whatever I want. Guys, are you even paying attention in there? Are you all geared up for the most exciting hour in radio history? Yeah, their thumbs are up in the air, and I know that they're playing Minesweeper on the computer back there because it's just around the corner and out of sight. Listen, to be honest, you're not going to want to change the station today. Today we're going to be dealing with a subject I think you're going to want to pay attention to, especially in the quickly changing political and social climate of our Western world. Here in the United States of America, it's pretty hard not to notice that something is definitely changing. There has been a marked decline in personal liberty, and I think everybody is sensing it. No matter what your background is, no matter what your political persuasion is, no matter what your religious persuasion is, everybody's sensing that it's different than it used to be. And I don't know about you, but I'm starting to worry that maybe the American Constitution doesn't mean much to some of the people who live inside the Beltway over in Washington, D.C. I'm starting to worry that maybe we're starting to lose sight. No, maybe we have lost sight of the original intent behind the great American experiment in self-government. So, today's show is going to be very American. Let me apologize to our non-American listeners because, well, this is going to focus on the United States. And I know we have people listening up in my home country, Canada, and we've got people listening today all over the globe. But even if you're outside of the United States, I think you're going to want to pay attention today because the great American experiment does affect the whole world. And the stuff that happens here usually has a large spillover effect in the rest of the globe. And the reason I know that is because I'm actually from outside the country myself. Now, I won't say I grew up in Canada because my wife would probably argue that I never grew up at all. So let me say it this way. I was reared in Canada. I spent most of my formative years outside of this country, and I'm keenly aware of how American culture and politics affect the rest of the planet. And I know for a fact that the whole world was watching this last election cycle, one of the most turbulent election seasons in American history. And people on both sides, or I should probably say people on every side, because there were actually more than two presidential candidates, people on every side of this last election are still reeling from what has happened. This last election wasn't just nasty. I think it actually shook a lot of people's confidence in the whole electoral system, the whole political system of America. But that's not really what I want to talk about today. Today isn't really about individual politicians or individual presidential candidates. What we're going to be looking at in this program is the issue of religious liberty. And this is something I think more people should be paying attention to because genuine religious liberty, the real thing, is really hard to find. Not just historically, but even today across the planet. It's not all that common. And if you have real religious liberty and you lose it, I think you've lost one of the most valuable commodities in the world. Over the last 2,000 years or so, ever since the inception of the Christian church in the first century, there have actually only been 3 or 4 times when biblical Christianity was in sync with popular culture, when the Bible was actually shaping the broader culture, when it was a part of everyday life. And one of those brief periods happened to be in our lifetimes, or if you're a little bit younger, maybe just before you were born. So, when you go to the middle of the 20th century, say the 1950s and 60s, American culture had a distinctly Christian flavor to it. You had all these great cultural icons who were distinctly religious, preachers who were popular and famous, Billy Graham, Fulton Sheen, Martin Luther King Jr. But then in the last few decades of the 20th century, during the 1980s and 1990s, something began to shift. The massive cultural shift of the 1960s started to spill into the classrooms and change the thinking of the general public. And of course, we also had a bunch of high-profile religious scandals, really awful stuff, that shook the public's trust in Christianity. So now today, we're faced with this situation where biblical Christianity is actually at odds with the prevailing culture. The way that it has been for most of its 2,000-year existence. Now, that's not to say that America has suddenly moved into a post-Christian phase. I know a lot of people are saying that today. I'm not convinced that we're post-Christian. If you go back to the 1790s, at the birth of America, only about 10% of Americans claimed any kind of church affiliation or membership. Folks, 10%. Today, the number is at least 4 times that. It's still close to 50%. So there's no question that America is still distinctly religious. In fact, when you come here from outside the country like I did, you can't help but notice how much more religious Americans are than other Westerners. I remember just sitting on a shuttle from the airport being shocked at how open people were about their religious faith. I was listening to conversations. They were talking about God. They were talking about the Bible. I wasn't used to that coming from outside the country. So is America still distinctly Christian? Yeah, you better believe it is. But at the same time, the prevailing culture has quickly moved away from traditional Christian values, and now we're faced with a situation where Christians have to make some really hard decisions in the face of new government policy. So, for example, if you own a bakery, but you personally don't feel comfortable making same-sex wedding cakes, you feel like that would be an infringement on your religious conscience. Today, if you won't do it, if you don't do it, you can literally be run out of business and punished legally, as we've seen in some cases in Colorado and Oregon lately. People just lose their business. Or, let's say you have personal convictions about birth control based on your deeply held faith, like the owners of the Hobby Lobby. They found themselves suddenly challenged with a highly visible legal battle because a new government mandate required them to provide birth control as part of their employees' health care plan. And it doesn't matter, listen to me carefully, it doesn't matter what your personal conviction is. It doesn't matter if you agree with the Hobby Lobby or you disagree with the Hobby Lobby, or you agree with the baker or you disagree with the baker. What we're talking about is religious liberty, giving people space to live by the dictates of their conscience. What we're talking about is the privilege. No, not the privilege, the right that Americans were supposed to have by the very design of the American Constitution to be able to live and relate to God however they saw fit. As the founders designed it, this was supposed to be a country where people answered directly to God on issues of conscience, not to some man-made authority. This is a country that does not have a king by design. It doesn't have a dictator. We're not supposed to be a republic of free people who have no rights to worship. We're a free republic of people who have the right to worship as we see fit, or not even worship anything or anybody if that's not what you want to do. This was a free nation. But I'm afraid it's starting to change. Because in the name of the common good, whatever the common good is, whoever gets to define what that is, we've come to this point where the government is starting to make religious decisions for us. And one of the areas where I'm particularly concerned about this is in the matter of education. See, Jean and I have 2 daughters. And thankfully, they're getting to the end of their grade school education. And so far, we've had the privilege of giving them a high-quality Christian education, which I believe has given them an excellent start in life. I look at my kids, and I see that they're learning to make their own decisions. They can think for themselves. And they're learning to exercise their faith in a world that doesn't agree with them. They have learned to accept other people and what they believe, but they also know exactly where they stand and know they're free to believe and act as they need to. Now, as religious liberty continues to decline, I'm actually not convinced that giving your kids a faith-based education is always going to be as easy as it is right now. Not that it's ever easy, because Jean and I have to pay for Christian school on top of paying the same taxes as everybody else, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, and by God's grace we've been able to do it, at least so far. It's not today I'm worried about, it's tomorrow. It's the future. In the future, if Christians don't learn to stand up for their God-given liberties, if we don't keep the erosion of liberty in check, I am not convinced that the same privilege will be available for my kids when they want to raise their children. I don't think they're going to be as free as I was. And that's why I've chosen today to speak out. And that's the reason we have got Stig Westerberg on the program today, because recently I caught wind of a development in the state of California that confirms my suspicions that religious liberty is in a bit of trouble. Today we're going to talk about Senate Bill 1146 from California. What will happen if it gets legs? What's the idea behind it? And my guest today is Stig Westerberg from the American Religious Liberty Institute. And I think, Stig, you're on the phone. Are you there?
I am, Shawn. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, sorry that you had to listen to my diatribe, but this is a topic that is really close to me. I am really worried that liberty is not what it used to be. I mean, one of the reasons I'm in America is because I was so much freer to do what I do here. I came from a country where I wasn't allowed to have a single faith radio station. It was practically illegal in Canada. And here in the in America, I'm free. And I know that you have been thinking about a lot of these things yourself lately, and I'm glad I managed to get you on the show. I know you've been busy. You've been traveling a lot lately. I think you've been doing some TV interviews, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yeah. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show and really kind of focus people's attention on what's going on with religious liberty, and using Senate Bill 1146 as an example of what is sweeping this nation.
Yeah, I think everybody is sensing it, and I know they're waving at me that my diatribe went on so long that I'll be up against a break in the near future here. They're smiling. They know me. I'm talkative. But I promise you this, when we come back from the break here in a couple of minutes, I want to explore that a little bit, and I appreciate that we'll start with Senate Bill 1146. I think the issue's much bigger than 1146. I think that's what you're saying, too. And I think that Christians this is a time where we need to sit up and pay attention to what's going on, because if we're not paying attention, by the time we see what's happened, it'll be too late. And so what we're going to do, Stig, you look at that. I hardly let you speak a word in the first segment of the show, but when we come back, the floor is going to be all yours. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and here it's radio too. You've been doing TV interviews. In radio, you don't even have to wear makeup. I mean, you can even wear a T-shirt and shorts and no shoes or socks or anything on radio. It doesn't matter. For me, they've got a camera in the studio. They've got 4K cameras, and so I actually had to put on a coat and comb my hair and brush my teeth for the show today. And so that it's not fair in a way. I guess you're probably comfortable in your study. My guest today on Disclosure is Stig Westerberg of the American Religious Liberty Institute. We're going to be talking in a moment about Senate Bill 1146 out of California, what it means for religious liberty in America, what it's an indication of, and what your future might hold if you don't pay attention to what's going on in this country. My name is Shawn Boonstra. You are listening to Disclosure, the newest radio offering from the good people at the Voice of Prophecy. We're about to take a break. I want you to listen carefully to this offer from the Voice of Prophecy. Grab a pen and paper, write it down, because you're going to want to take advantage of it. And then in a moment, I'll be right back with Stig Westerberg.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, does my life really matter to God? And a second chance at life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
And we are back from the break. My name is Shawn Boonstra, your host on Disclosure, the newest radio show from the people at the Voice of Prophecy. My guest today is Stig Westerberg. And Stig, before the break, I promised that I would give you a little more airtime and stop the diatribe for a moment. But I think maybe the best place to start today is with Senate Bill 1146 coming out of California. Maybe some people have heard of it. Maybe some people have never heard about it. To say the least, it's a very controversial bill. I know a lot of people like Wheaton College, Biola University, Christianity Today, they're up in arms about it. They're not happy at all. Tell me what Senate Bill 1146 is and why it got your attention.
Well, Senate Bill 1146 was aimed at private religious institutions of higher education here in California. There are 32 of those institutions, and the intent was to frame it as an anti-discrimination bill, a bill that would take the focus off of a select group of people and ensure that they were able to live their lives the way they chose to, even if that violated the tenets of the school that they had chosen to attend. This is an elective choice, and these aren't state-run or federally run schools. These are private organizations.
Okay. So we're talking religious colleges, which explains to me why I saw protest from Biola and I saw protest from Wheaton and some of these other schools.
Well, exactly. In 1146, the way that they approached it, the way that they framed it, would have made it impossible for religious schools to actually be religious, right? So in other words, the tenets that they have that make them unique in the way that they approach life, approach education, they wouldn't necessarily be able to continue. And the fears were like, for the American Jewish University, that perhaps they would not be able to have kosher-only menus in their cafeterias. Many of the schools require some sort of profession of faith from their students.
Right.
Right.
Which is the reason these schools exist, right? Parents looking to educate their children within a certain framework. It's not that these schools are afraid of different points of view. I know that my kids go to a private school, and I encourage them to study other points of view so they understand them. But I think we're talking about compulsion to either abandon your own frame of reference, your own religious views, or to, under coercion, adopt someone else's.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah. And so, I saw this and I realized that there was a real problem in how people were viewing these schools, how they were approaching it, and an even larger problem in the ability for people interested in religious liberty, Christians or non-Christians, but really kind of in this particular instance, a very heavy Christian focus, who are interested in religious liberty, to be able to get their viewpoint back across to these elected representatives.
Right.
And
And I'm glad you said religious and non-religious. I think everybody wins if we have genuine religious liberty in America. I mean, this is the one place on earth where we've ever had the real thing. I mean, it was deliberately drafted by the founders of this nation. The Constitution was drafted in such a way that you could be directly accountable to God without a middleman, or not accountable to God if that's what you chose, but there was no human being in between you and God, or you and no God if that's what you chose, and no one got to call the shots. People were allowed to, I think there was a letter in 1790 from George Washington to a Jewish synagogue. They were worried because after the founding of America, they were worried that maybe organized Christianity would persecute them the way that it had, say, in southern Europe, in places like Spain with the Spanish Inquisition and so on. And George Washington actually wrote them, and he quoted from the book of Micah, chapter 4, saying, no, every man's going to be free to sit under his own vine and fig tree in this country. You get to live how you see fit and answer to the dictates of your conscience. And if I understand right, I mean, that's the reason that we have such a plurality of Christian colleges in this country, is so that people have that right. I want my kids to understand my Christian viewpoint and get an education in a place where that is affirmed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are the specific challenges that colleges are facing? You gave the example of, kosher food in the cafeteria. A student could still pass by the pork if they're forced to put pork out in the kosher. You could still walk past that. What are the bigger challenges that we're facing? What are the real threats to Christian liberty that are taking place with Senate Bill 1146?
Well, this bill is being pushed by an LGBT agenda.
Now, those are letters of the alphabet that seem to come up a lot. I mean, I'm just going to be blunt. They come up a lot in the disputes that concern religious liberty.
They do, and it's unfortunate, but they have set their sights on Christian education, and feel that there are efforts to exclude people that choose to live that lifestyle from being able to fully participate in those sorts of schools. That, in my mind, raises a much bigger issue, which is why are they at those schools in the first place?
Sure.
And I say that not flippantly. I say that because education, at least in my family, has been a highly personal decision that we sit down as a family, we understand what we're looking for. Of course, everybody's after the basic. You want a degree from which you can earn a living, but you then start looking at the attributes of each school and what you're looking for. And we choose a school based upon that school having religious beliefs in line with ours.
Correct.
And so it's, I view that as a contract. I view that as, okay, I choose this school because its belief system aligns with mine. Why would I choose a school whose belief systems do not align with my belief system and then want to go in there and try to force that school to change to match mine? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it makes me suspect there's a larger agenda besides just the so-called equality of access and so on, because there is such a huge variety. If I wanted to this afternoon, I could find a New Age college that would teach me spirit channeling, and I could sign up for that. And there's such a variety. Not that I'm into that. Let's be clear with the radio audience. I'm not into that at all. It's just as an example. I'm free to go wherever I want. And, I went to a public university, Stig. I went to the University of Victoria up in Canada, and it's anything but a Christian university. And I sat through that faced with viewpoints that were completely contrary to my own, or at least to the ones I was raised with, because I really wasn't a very good Christian as a kid. But I was raised with a completely different set of values. But never once did it occur to me that I'm going to change the whole university. I went in eyes open, knowing full well I was going to be faced with a different point of view, and that's what I signed up for. And so I'm starting to wonder if there's not a larger agenda besides just, availability or access or equality.
Well, I think that there is, and I think that we have seen examples where it started out where people said that we're looking for equality in marriage, right? And so gay marriage came about,
right?
And that was supposedly the attainable item that they were looking for, but it never ends there, does it? And we see this with all special interests, right? I guess you would call it mission creep,
right?
So you accomplish one purpose, and then the organizations exist for a purpose. You got to find the next thing that you're going to tackle and take on. And so we're seeing that now with the schools where young people are there trying to enhance their knowledge and their education, but live within the confines of the faith that they believe in. And they're being denied that ability. I have a 22-year-old daughter. She absolutely gets upset, maybe hysterical, but that's not the right word. But in other words, I'm trying to convey the sense of passion that she has about this, where she may find that somebody of a different gender is in her locker room.
Right.
Okay? I mean, this is not the sort of thing that she wants or was raised to believe is acceptable. God made male and female very differently, establish the pattern of families and the pattern that relationships have historically taken. And, we still believe in that.
So this is a good example of one of the real challenges that somebody might face. They go to a Christian college expecting the values that they were raised with. If somebody with another private university wants transgender bathrooms, that's entirely their business. At least that's the way I look at it. You're free to do that. But at the same time, I'm free to open a school where we live within the value system that Christianity teaches, a Judeo-Christian value system. And I think you're pointing out that is this one of the specific challenges that students at these Christian universities are facing, the issue of transgender washrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, and also same-sex housing, right? So where you can be housed in a dormitory where there are same-sex, same-gendered people that are openly cohabitating and living together, which clearly is not supported by the Bible.
Right.
And so these sorts of issues are the ones that are being raised, and they're treating them as a violation of personal freedoms. And our argument is that those have no place within a private institution where that institution exists solely to be different in those areas which have religious guidance and significance to us.
Right. So if a university, let's say it's a Lutheran university, an old school Lutheran university, and they want to provide housing to students, and they have married housing, at least that's the way it used to be in the old days. You've got married and non-married housing.
Yes.
You could end up in a situation where you're forced to have common law couples live in your married housing as a Christian university, or a same-sex couple living there, if I understand this correctly.
Both. Yeah, that is correct. And while this bill, of course, is focused here in California, but we already talked about the fact that there are organizations behind these bills, right? That are driving this, and organizations that seek to influence legislation like that are opportunistic in the sense that they're looking at all 50 states. They're looking for places that they can create the beachhead on their particular policy, get it enacted, and then watch and see how post-law litigation plays out, because inevitably that does come next, and then use it as a springboard to move it across the nation.
Okay, let me push the pause button there because we're up against our next break already. When the topic is fascinating like this, the time goes quickly. But Stieg, when we come back from the break, I want to address that a little more closely because the question is, okay, this is going down in California. Why should I care living in Colorado? So let's pick that up in a minute just after this break. Listening at home, I'm with Stieg Westerberg from the American Religious Liberty Institute, and we're talking about Senate Bill 1146, but we're talking about a lot more than that. We're talking about religious liberty in America. So grab a pen and paper, write down this offer from the Voice of Prophecy. I'm going to be back in just a moment and pick up that question again. Why should you care if you're not living in California? How does this issue affect you? You're listening to Disclosure. I'll be right back.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions? Like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Does my life really matter to God? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers that you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter the most to you. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
And we are back with our third segment of today's episode of Disclosure. My name is Shawn Boonstra. We are dealing with one of the hot-button issues of the 21st century here in North America and really around the Western world. And it has a lot to do with individual liberty and the LGBT movement and the way that that clashes with private Christian institutions and private Christian businesses and so on. My guest today is Steve Westerberg of the American Religious Liberty Institute. You can find his website at arlinstitute.org. That's arlinstitute.org. And Steve, just before the break, I was asking you, why should I care about this living in Colorado? So they have this bill in California where they can force housing. You know, you can a Christian university has to take a same-sex couple into the dorm. Why should I care about that living here in Colorado?
Well, that's an excellent question, Shawn, and it's because that people look to different states and understand a state may have a particular representative who's willing to push an issue, or they may have people that are perhaps more open-minded to their particular viewpoint, and they use that as a beachhead. But it is just a beachhead, and the goal here is to get consistent laws across all 50 states. And so, if I'm driving a particular viewpoint, I find a beachhead, I find a place that I can get that law enacted, and once it's in place, I watch it, I see how things go with the litigation, because there will be litigation after a law like this goes into effect, and then I look at how I can move that across the rest of the states, and all we have to do is look at Colorado as the example with recreational marijuana use.
Right.
That was the first state, but it certainly has not been the last, right?
No, it's spilling across the nation, sure.
Exactly. And here in California, it's on the ballot here for this election. And so the point is that this litigation does move across all the states, and it will impact absolutely everybody ultimately.
Listen, one of the issues that comes out of Senate Bill 1146 is an issue that I think goes much deeper and much further across all religious institutions or private institutions, because we've become a society that is so dependent on government funding. If I understand this correctly, one of the key issues, one of the entering wedges in this topic, the reason that some people like the bill's sponsor, Ricardo Lara, is saying, hey, we have a right to interfere in the private belief system of this college because they're taking government funding. Is that really one of the key issues?
Well, certainly it's used as an important point. In order for the schools to not be affected by this, they would have had to, and let's be clear, this particular bill, the way it was drafted, has been modified at the last minute. So we're talking about a bill with a very hot-button issue.
Right. That
was modified at the last minute to require reporting. So in other words, they're going to use it to collect data.
Oh wow!
If somebody comes in and they are claiming that they are being discriminated against because they're not able to go into the shower of their choice, in the locker room, or any other issue like that. That's just one example. Then of course it gets reported. They can build data. And he has promised to come back and readdress these issues. So we expect that this fight is just beginning.
Sure.
In this state.
Sure. And if I understand right, it's not just that the colleges are receiving, in California, receiving government funding. There's also the issue of the Cal grants, right? And so the student gets a Cal grant. What is it, like $10,000 a year, whatever that fund is, and they're supposed to be able, almost like a voucher, to apply it to any college of their choice. Is there a threat then that they lose that funding if they apply that to a Christian university?
Absolutely. That would be the way that the institution would exempt themselves from the requirements of this particular bill, at least anyhow. Your students would no longer be able to receive the Cal Grant funds. Now, let's be clear, the Cal Grant gets created through the payment of taxes.
right,
while paying taxes, right? So even the Christians that are attending these schools are paying their fair share of taxes as required by law. And so, but once that money is into the government coffers, it is considered public money. And the individuals who attend the school that qualify for Cal grants, and there's a process that people go through. They look at income levels and of the students, of the family, and so on, and make determination as to how much of the Cal grant you can get. And it has varied. I think last year it was around $5,000. In previous years it's been up above $9,000.
Okay.
It varies depending upon how much money is available and what's going on with the state's budget and so on. But schooling has gotten very expensive.
Yes,
and there's
it
a
has.
whole lot of thought and reasoning behind why it has gotten out of control. Some people point to the whole creation of student loans,
right,
many years ago, as what enabled the overall growth of the cost of education. But the fact is that here we are in 2016, and school is expensive.
Yeah.
It can be anywhere from $30,000 and up to attend, and so the access to financial assistance like that is important for students with the current structure and the
right.
current cost of school.
Yeah. We could probably launch another program on it. I know I have some personal convictions about maybe the government ought to just get out of it altogether. But that's a different topic for another day. I tend to agree. Look, if I own a bakery and I find out that the government just gave everybody a $20 voucher for bread, guess what? The price of my bread just went up. But it's another topic. I think this could be solved if Cal grants. I mean, that's the system we have, whether we like it or not. And college is expensive. Kids are getting student loans. If we viewed it as a voucher, they could apply that wherever they wanted. So let's say that I'm a Lutheran kid, wants to go to a Lutheran university or a Baptist. I don't mean to pick on any one denomination or speak for them, but go to a Baptist university or something like that. And I like that lifestyle. I like their moral code at that university. Why shouldn't I apply that Cal grant wherever I want to go?
Well, you should be able to, and in general, you can. I mean, that's the way it works here in California. As long as the school is accredited, the state maintains a website that you go through in registering, and you make sure that the school of your choice is listed there, and then you're able to apply that. And so in practice, particularly with colleges and universities, you are able to apply it to the school of your choice. The problem, of course, comes in when you get, an elected official like this, a politician who then wants to leverage that to enact their agenda.
Right. So you could start removing colleges from the list, and even though the parents of those students also pay taxes, they're suddenly not on the list, and the Cal grant doesn't apply to them if somebody starts to use it as a wedge.
Yes.
Let me ask you this question. We've talked about students so far. Does this kind of legislation, does this kind of thinking affect the staff, the faculty of a university as well?
Well, it certainly can. It opens up the schools, the institutions, to litigation on a number of fronts. The same issues that apply to the students could in theory apply to the teachers, the faculty.
So we could end up with a situation where a teacher then, may not believe in my church's belief system at all, but because of government funding and pushes from organizations like the ACLU, I've got to hire them, and it doesn't matter what they believe. They're free to now teach those students who are paying for a distinctly Christian education.
That's right, and this helps water down the message that the parents and the student chose that school in the first place. But yeah, it's a real problem, and it does happen. It's ongoing.
Let me ask you a little bit about you and the ARLI. I understand this is one of many issues that sort of spurred you to get this going. What is ARLI, and why did you start it?
So ARLI is the American Religious Liberty Institute, and I started this organization to create a grassroots ability for Christians, really for anybody interested in religious liberty and that value the freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution, to get actively involved in the process. And in looking at the lay of the land and understanding that it is difficult to work through a highly politicized court system any longer.
Sure.
And
well, who's got the know-how? You know.
Yeah, and it's expensive. There's a lot of activist judges out there, and I think it's a pretty well established and understood fact that the judicial system really is not necessarily impartial any longer.
Right.
And
well, that was one of the biggest issues in the last election. I mean, everybody was talking about, hey, whoever gets to pick the next Supreme Court justices is going to sway America for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, and just listening to that talk, it just validates and proves, okay, well, if that really is the case, and truly, the individuals being chosen are not impartial arbiters of the law, we need to look at the best place that we can ensure that our constitutionally guaranteed rights are taken care of. And for us, that means we're looking at pending legislation.
Sure.
And so the intent here is to be tracking and watching bills that impact religious liberty at a federal level and at all 50 states. And that's kind of our starting point. And we can talk about where that goes from here. But once a bill hits a critical point where an individual where it is appropriate for an individual to contact their senator, their congressman, could be at a state level, could be at a federal level, and let them know their opinion, our system will guide them through that.
Okay, so it's a great resource for Christians or people of other faiths or even people who are just worried about religious liberty to first of all know what's going on, if I'm hearing you right.
Absolutely, and I think that people are going to be surprised as we get this information online and realize that we are in the process of building this, and so the more you visit the website, the more you're going to see the changes. But as we bring this online, I think people are going to be shocked at how many bills that are out there across the U.S. that are focused on these hot-button issues.
All right, that website is arlinstitute.org. My guest today is Stig Westerberg. I'm up against another break. We're going to come back and talk about the work of ARLI and what's available to you, how you can get involved, and what the issues are facing us in America as we're watching the decline of religious liberty. My name is Shawn Boonstra. You are listening to Disclosure, and we will be right back after this brief message. Creation, evolution. Where did the world come from? Where did you come from? Were you created in an instant? Did you evolve from another animal or life species? These are issues that are discussed in classrooms, textbooks, and sometimes around your break table at work, when the conversation suddenly turns serious. These kinds of questions are answered in our free Discover Bible Guides. These 26 beautifully illustrated guides cover all the major themes of the Bible, and they answer some of the hardest questions of life. You can get your free copy just for the asking by contacting me. Go to VOP.com and click on the tab that says Study. That's VOP.com, the tab that says Study, or phone me, 888-456-7933. That's 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides, available just for the asking. And I could see them laughing in the control room because that last spot for the Discover Bible Guides is the one where my voice cracks like Mr. Haney when I say, phone me. and one of my proudest moments in radio history. My guest today is Stig Westerberg of the American Religious Liberty Institute. And Stig, what do you say to people who say, look, you're just trying to force your Christian views on everybody else? That's what this is about. This is another Christian institution trying to take over government and force your religion down everybody's throat.
Well, I would argue that we're doing exactly the opposite. We're trying to live by the standards that were envisioned by the writers of our Constitution, who really the creators of this country, this nation, as it has functioned. And it's to us, it's pretty clear that there needs to be less government intrusion into the ability for people to worship God and live their lives the way that they believe that God wants them to live them. I would argue that the converse is going on, and that is that laws are being created, enacted, that are designed to force God out of these private organizations. Remember, these aren't public universities, public colleges. They're private, and they were created by people who profess a certain faith and a certain belief system. They're attended by people that profess that same faith and believe that same way, and yet we have outside influences that look like they simply want to force their viewpoints onto the religious institutions. Historically, religious institutions have been exempt from these sorts of laws.
Right.
And so this is a very direct frontal assault, I would say, versus the opposite. We're not out trying to ram our agenda down their throat. That if we did that, we would be out litigating that our belief system should be ingrained within public institutions.
Right.
And that's not what we're doing.
Well, and I would agree with that. I mean, there's my personal point of view, is that life would be so much better if we went back to the way that this nation was designed in the first place.
Yes.
If we just stay out of everybody's hair and let them live according to the dictates of their conscience. Look, folks, if you want to live in a same-sex relationship, go knock yourselves out. Nobody's going to stop you from doing that. But at the same time, you ought not to be interfering in groups, churches or church schools, that believe differently than you. And I guess, Stig, one of the things I'm concerned about is that a lot of these Christian schools are extensions of the churches that they represent. And here I am as a pastor, and I'm looking at these issues saying, okay, if a church does not believe in same-sex marriage, they just don't want to perform those weddings, how long until the lobby groups comes knocking, if they get the victory in the school, how long till we come knocking on the door of the church saying, okay, Mr. Pentecostal preacher, you're going to do this wedding or you're going to face consequences?
I think that's a real concern.
Yeah.
And I would suspect that's probably next on the agenda. But what our goal is to fight the battle that's in front of us right now and help ensure that it doesn't get to that point.
Well, I actually think that we could solve a lot of it. In the church front, there's an easy solution. Right now, if I do a wedding, I'm an agent of the state. And so the state has some say in whether, it's almost the same issue with government funding. I'm an agent of the state doing their legal paperwork, and so they probably have reason to say, hey, you're going to do the following because you represent our interests. It might be time for the church to break completely free of doing state weddings. Everybody goes to the justice of the peace, and then you have a religious blessing on that marriage back at the church, and it's a non-legal ceremony. I'm not sure that that's available when it comes to Christian schools, though, because education is considered a universal right, and so I don't think the fight's going to be quite as simple in the education arena. Stig, let me ask you this. Well, there's a huge swath of Christianity, particularly coming out of the 1800s. Or even earlier, if you go back to European, Reformation history. There's a huge swath of Christianity that says church and state should be utterly separated, and I think you and I have both just stated we agree with that. But some people would go a step further and say, why would Christians get involved in the political process at all? What do you say to those people?
Oh, I say that you're turning over the nation and the power structures that exist around you to the devil, quite frankly.
Right.
And because if we as Christians don't ensure that our rights to practice our faith and worship God the way that we believe that He wants us to aren't protected by us, they're not going to be protected by the other side. And so I would argue that we would have just as bad a problems. And so you mentioned the Reformation. Just prior to the Reformation, across most of Europe, church and state were basically one and the same, right? And we had long periods of incredible persecution of people that didn't toe the line. Now, back then, that persecution was directed at Christians that didn't believe in that particular
by the official
power
state line,
structure
right?
that existed, right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and so now if you go completely the opposite, which is Christians literally have zero to do with politics. They have no say-so in who is going to represent them in government. You're asking to drop right back into that same level of persecution again. It's just on the opposite side.
Tell me about Stig Westerberg a little bit. I know that this has to do with Christian education. This is the issue, the hot button issue for you, or at least how things got started for ARLI. What do you bring to the table? I know you're not an educator, you're not a college professor or a college administrator, you're not a member of the Legislative Assembly of California or the state government. Who is Stig Westerberg, and how did you get involved in this? Why are you doing it?
Well, so I'm a technologist. I build software companies. I've focused on building systems that impact lots of people, have the ability to deliver services and software to many people, millions of people, and I felt that there needed to be a way that skill set, and so currently I'm the CEO of AltoServe,
okay.
AltoServ.com, AltoServe, and we build a system there that helps people. The goal is to help people by guiding them through the process of being prepared for a disaster, and then ultimately the need to file an insurance claim or interface with a disaster response agency like FEMA or the SBA or others. There's many of them, and so by helping people, we ensure that they don't become victims a second time. Not that your insurance company is necessarily evil, because they're not. They just
but they're also in it for profit.
Work with.
They're also in it for a profit. Sure.
Yeah, and so the goal is to help people, and just as we've built massive systems over there that can help a lot of people make sure that they know what they own, that they're empowered through that process, and it's transparent between them and the adjuster, and they can value their possessions that are part of a loss and so on. That same ability to build systems that scale massively and make the process transparent for people to enact with their representatives. To me, it was just a natural extension of that skill set and that ability to help people become empowered through a particular process. And we would invite people to go check out AltoServe, AltoServ.com, and give the software a try and be prepared for something bad to happen. I started that company because we went through a house fire.
Sure.
And for us, it was a partial fire, but I found out what it was really like.
You suddenly got me wondering if I left the iron on at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you think about it. You come home and maybe part of your house is gone, and it doesn't have to be a fire. It can be a flood, earthquake, hurricane, tornado. I mean, the perils are. It seems like they're getting more numerous, and the last couple of summers, most of the West has been on fire, literally, and a lot of homes lost. And even when you take those stats out and you look at it, over 1,000 homes catch on fire every day across the U.S.
Wow.
Right? It just doesn't hit the collective conscience because it's not all in one place all at one time. It's
right.
it's here and there across the U.S. And so, you think about it, would you be able to write down everything that you own? Would you be able to say where you bought it, how much you paid for it, a good description?
Yeah, not a chance.
Do you have proof of any of this, right?
No.
I mean, these are crucial things. And then start thinking beyond that to, copies of your tax returns or wills or trusts or, literally any paper-based contract, agreement, document, certificate, etc., that you may want to have proof of. What if that burned up?
So,
with an AlphaServe account, it won't, right? You just store it.
You're taking that skill set that you've got in crisis management and applying it to a much larger ideological crisis that's going on in America with ARLI.org. We've only got a couple of minutes left, Stieg. It's a fascinating topic. Give me some actionable steps for parents in private schools. What's the first step? What can somebody do?
I tell you, the first step is that you need to go to arlinstitute.org and bookmark that website and then sign up for the mail list. Now, bookmarking the website, of course, we want you coming back and watching. The mail list is because as we see legislation that needs people to respond, we're going to send out what we're calling an action alert. And you get that action alert, you're going to be able to click a button on it, and we will seamlessly walk you through the process of making sure that your elected representative knows your position on this. And the intent here is to remove those barriers between you and your speech being delivered to your representative. And we will guide you in how to present it, what to say, who your representatives are, and we will drop that message into their inbox, onto their fax machines, onto their social media sites that they maintain. And the goal here is to empower you to make sure that your voice is heard. So that's the number one thing. Go to the website, bookmark it, and then sign up for that mailing list.
So that website again.
arlinstitute.org.
ARL Institute, spell the word institute, arlinstitute.org.
Yes.
I know that a lot of parents are listening, and maybe you've got little ones who haven't started school yet. You need to pay attention to this stuff. Even if you don't have kids, folks, you've got to pay attention to what's going on. American religious liberty is eroding, and as America goes, much of the rest of the world is going to go. Stieg, I know you're a busy guy. I really appreciate you taking a little bit of time for us on Disclosure. That website one more time?
arlinstitute.org.
Great. And people can find information on what's going on, not just California Senate Bill 1146, but as this grows, you're going to find out what else is going on in your neck of the woods, and who you can talk to about it, how you can preserve your church's right to believe as you see fit and to answer to God according to the dictates of your conscience. Stieg, I have used up all the time today. I really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and calling in from California on the program today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think we're going to keep touch and see what else is going on at ARLI, at the American Religious Liberty Institute. As for the program, I am afraid, I can tell by the music playing in my ears, that we are out of time for this week. So until we meet again, either on iHeartRadio, you can download this as a podcast, or on the station in your neighborhood. Till we meet again in some other venue, in some other place, this has been Disclosure. My name is Shawn Boonstra. Thank you so much for joining us today.